Hello.
Hello.
Would you like to, sorry, one microphone, do I know what to do? Would you like to just, before you start, just tell us a little bit about yourself for people who maybe weren't here yesterday?
Great, my name's Michael. You can probably hear I'm not from Glasgow originally. I originally come from Leicester. Studied, dare I say it, in Edinburgh, across the way, and I live down in Bournemouth, or I have done for the last 10 years, although my job takes me all over the UK and Europe as well, doing events like this, helping people to really engage with some of the claims of Christianity and dealing with some of the big objections and questions that people might have. And it's really good to be here this week. I'm going to be speaking at a number of the events through the week and each evening as well. And so if this is your first time, hopefully it won't be your last time. You don't need to worry about lunch really for the week. You can come along and get lunch with us, and you don't really need to worry about puddings in the evening, because you can come along and get fed enough cakes to keep you going all the way to the gym. Okay, so welcome, and as we said, the format is going to be talk and then questions, so please do either text in or think of your questions, and you can either put your hand up or text in at the end, and we'll get through as many as we can. And if you haven't got a lecture at 1 o'clock, you're very welcome to stay for that as well, because we're going to have another talk looking on a similar theme but a different question that I'll mention later. But we're looking at this question of the church today. Why is the church, why are God's followers so full of hypocrites? Which is a big question, isn't it? Up to a third of the world's population claims to be part of the church. It's the biggest sociological phenomenon in history when you stop to think about it. And yet for many people, their experience of the church is incredibly negative. And maybe that's the case for some of you. And maybe for different reasons. It may be because of the media perception of the church. And certainly in Britain, for all sorts of reasons, that could be the case. The church is hardly ever reported positively in the media, but then again, is anything ever reported positively in the media these days? But the church is often reported because of some scandal, because of its stance on homosexuality or whatever. And so our perception through the media of the church can be very negative. And obviously, most of us are in touch with what's going on in the media. We've all been aware of that. But more personally, and probably a much bigger issue for some of us, is not just the media perception of the church, but our own experience of it. I guess in a room like this, we've had some experience of the church. Some of you may have been brought up going to church. You may have been taken to a church. Or you probably at one stage or another bumped into Christians who are part of a church. And it may well be that your experience of church or people from church has really clouded your whole perception of Christianity. Your experience of Christians has been a very negative one. And can I say, if that is the case for you, firstly, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that's been the case. And secondly, thank you for coming, because it would have been very easy for you to kind of say, well, I've had enough, I've had it up to here with Christianity in the church. I'm not going to bother looking into it. So thank you that you've even bothered to come for the lunch, okay? Now, you may have just come for the lunch and not for the talk, but that's okay. But thank you for listening, okay? Thank you for giving us another shot. So you may have a negative perception, and one of the biggest negative perceptions we have of the church is often hypocrisy that seems to go with Christianity. For an organisation that's meant to preach moral values, the church can often seem to be very immoral. It practices one thing, it preaches another. We see this kind of double standards. And sometimes it's mildly amusing. I mean, I remember when I was studying in Edinburgh, I was going to church with a guy in the evening who was going to drive me home to Leicester, where my parents' home was. And I remember him saying to me, it was a hot summer's day, which is a rarity for Edinburgh, but it was a hot summer's day, so I was wearing my shorts. And I remember him saying to me, "You can't go to church dressed in shorts. What would God think?" And I was like, well, I don't think God's got a problem with my knees. Maybe you do. But he was really offended at this and wanted me to go and wear trousers. Anyway, went to church. After church, we then got into his car and drove home. He was driving, and he drove at 120 miles an hour all the way down the M6 back to Leicester. And I was thinking, maybe God didn't have a problem with my shorts, but I think he might have had a problem with your blatant breaking of the speed limits. And we see this kind of double standards, We have a problem with nitty, things, that aren't really important, but actually we have big issues, there seems to be hypocrisy. And then sometimes it's not just trivial, is it? The abuse scandals, some of the stuff we've seen going on, it's a massive issue. Now, it would be easy, wouldn't it, to say, okay, the church is messed up, forget the church, just look at Jesus, read the Bible. It would be easy for me to say that today, I'd love to, but actually I can't quite do that. Because actually, if you do read the Bible, and if you listen to what Jesus says, he says that he and his church are connected together in a very close way. And he uses certain metaphors, certain pictures to try and describe that link between the person of Jesus in history and the church as a establishment, as an organisation today. One of the metaphors that he uses is the picture of a body and a head. Jesus says that he is the head and the church is the body. So if we're going to say to Jesus, we'll just look at Jesus, but we won't worry about the church. It's a bit like meeting a really nice girl and saying, I really love your face, but your body's a bit of a mess. Like, it wouldn't go down too well. She's not going to feel complimented that you like her face if you're just saying that her body, she needs to go to the gym. They go together, don't they? And so Jesus and his church go together, or it's a bit like a family. I remember I was I met a family a while back, and I didn't know much about them. I had not met them before, and I met some of their kids, and one of their kids was just really unruly. He was so badly behaved. He didn't listen to what his mum was saying. He was just causing havoc. And I didn't say it, because of course you never say these things, but I remember thinking it. I remember thinking, I wonder what those parents are like. Because the behaviour of the child certainly reflected on the whole family and on the parents. And if God is a father and the church is meant to be his family, then the behaviour of certain Christians seems to reflect badly, doesn't it, on what God is like. So our issue with the church is not just with the church, it is fundamentally with God and with Jesus. What is he doing? Is he an irresponsible parent? Has he got a bit of a messed up body? How do we deal with this charge of hypocrisy? Now, it's fair to say that in the last 2,000 years since the church was established, lots of things have changed. In the first century, the church didn't have buildings, authority structures, establishments and things like that. But some things haven't changed, and that is to say that ever since the church was first established, it has been filled with messed up people. It has never been perfect. You get some people in church and they say, the good old days. I'm like, which days? Read the Bible. I mean, Jesus, when he was establishing the church, chose a group of people to be a part of his followers who were going to then be the leaders of that early church. Who would you have picked to be part of that movement? Do you know who Jesus picked? He picked tax collectors. Now, that doesn't mean anything to us, but think high-level corrupt bankers. They were going to be in his group. He picked a religious zealot. Think religious fundamentalist. He picked uneducated people. He picked big-mouthed, hot-headed, impatient people. He picked a right bunch of people. And he says, you guys are going to be the leaders of my church. And then, if you start to read particularly the letters of the New Testament written to the first churches that were established, reading between the lines, and not just between the lines, reading the lines themselves, you will see that those churches were not perfect churches. You've got immorality, you've got divisions, you've got popularity cults. So the church of the first century was certainly not made up of perfect people, and nor was it led by perfect people. Some of the leaders had to be rebuked for the wrong attitudes that they held. So does that mean the church was and is hypocritical? And I would suggest no. And the answer is to look at what the word hypocritical actually means. What do we mean when we say that someone is hypocritical? The word hypocritical, hypocrisy, comes from the idea of wearing a mask. If you look at the root of the word, that's where it comes from. That an actor would wear a mask and pretend to be someone that they're not, to act a part that you're not. And so when you're saying that someone's being hypocritical, you're saying they are pretending to be someone they're not. They are saying they're one thing, but they're actually another. They're hypocrites. Now, I think this is really important. Is the church full of hypocrites? Well, what is the church claiming to be? That's an important question that we need to ask. Most of us assume that the way to become a Christian, become part of the church, is basically through our moral conformity to a set of rules. That Christians are claiming to be morally superior. That's why God accepts us. We've followed the rules, we've been to church, we've earned our religious brownie points, we're in, and you're not quite good enough yet. And we're appalled that Christians can therefore be so messed up. Aren't they meant to be better than the rest of us? But while that is the way much of religion works, that is certainly not the way Christianity works and Jesus works. See, Jesus says the church is not made up of morally superior people who've made it, but messed up people who recognise their need of forgiveness. Actually, that's why the church is often made up of messed up people, because messed up people find it easier to accept their need of forgiveness rather than the morally elites who think they don't need it, who think they're okay. But Jesus says this is what a church is. It's made up of messed up people who need forgiveness and acknowledge their need for it. Therefore, to say, oh look, the church is full of messed up people, is not to say the church is full of hypocrites. It never claims to be a place of morally superior people, or at least it shouldn't do. It claims to be a place where messed up people find forgiveness, transformation, and hope. You know, think about it. If you were to go down to a hospital and walk around the hospital and think, oh my goodness, this hospital is such a bad hospital, it's full of sick people, I'd be like, nah, that's what it's for, okay? It's a hospital. You don't claim that the hospital's a bad hospital because it has sick people in it. Equally, a church is not a bad church because it has messed up people in it. Jesus says that's exactly what a church is for. So a church is for people who are messed up. Jesus doesn't say, sort your life out and then you're welcome. He says, no, come, you're welcome, and I will sort you out. He loves us so much that he'll take us as we are. But he also loves us so much, he doesn't want to leave us as we are. And that's why the place of the church should be a place of acceptance, a place of messed up people, but also a place of transformation, a place where people are being changed to become different people. Now, I don't know about you, but I guess most of us have had experiences of Christians, as I mentioned earlier, that have been negative. Maybe you've looked at these Christians and think, yeah, but they claim, but still, you know, they do things, they've said things, they've acted in ways that we still have a problem with. What is going on there? Well, let me suggest that it might be one of three things that's happening in this situation, okay? If you've had a negative experience of a Christian has acted or behaved. It may be that Christian is what I would call a work in progress. Every Christian continually wears L plates throughout their lives. That is to say, we never make it. We are being changed. Our acceptance is instantaneous the moment we come to Jesus and receive his forgiveness. But that transformation is continuous and won't finish until I get to heaven. We're being changed. And some people have got a lot more changing to do than others. Let me give you a story. A friend of mine was planting a church, starting a church in South London, quite a rough area of South London where there's a lot of gang culture. And she's doing great work with young people there. They had a lot of gangs coming along to the church, which made Sunday services fun. And some of these gang members became Christians. And on one particular Sunday, my friend Amy was at the youth group, and these gang members came up to her and they said, you know, Amy, since we've started following Jesus, we've decided we're not going to carry guns anymore. And Amy thought to herself, wonderful, Christian growth at last, they're not carrying guns. And then she paused and they said, we've decided we're only going to carry knives. Now, we laugh, don't we? Because if you met a Christian walking down the street saying, hi, I love Jesus and I carry a knife, you would think, I'm not even a Christian and I don't carry a knife. But actually for them, that was growth. If you look at the context of where they were coming from, there was massive change going on. Okay, there was a lot of change still needed. But often what we do is we judge people in isolation out of the context. We say, well, my friend is a Christian, they're a much nicer person. But actually, we don't bear in mind where that person has come from, the context, their background, their upbringing. There is a work in progress. Don't judge people before you know where they've come from. So that might be one thing. It might be this person has lots of issues, but they are being changed. And they're not what they used to be, even though they're not yet what they will be. It may be that actually what you've experienced in that Christian has been a short-term failure or kind of aberration. And that does happen as well. And Peter, one of the early Christian leaders, had to be taken aside by one of the other Christian leaders, Paul, for his behaviour that wasn't in line with his beliefs as a Christian. He was being treating certain people as favourites, he was excluding others. And sometimes Christians, even Christian leaders, do fail. Now, if they do genuinely know and love Jesus, I think that failure will be temporary. And I think that fairly soon they should acknowledge that failure, acknowledge that it was wrong, seek forgiveness for it, and also seek, with God's help, transformation and change. Christians won't get it right all along. I and others will fail. But we hopefully, because we've understood that being a Christian is about accepting and receiving forgiveness, acknowledge it and move on from that. It may be a third thing though. It may be that the Christian that you've come in contact with and had experience of is a Christian in name only. By that I mean they claim to follow Jesus, but actually they know nothing of the reality of Jesus' forgiveness and power in their lives. And again, that could be the case. Jesus acknowledged that this can often be the case. He said, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, the people who claim to follow Jesus, not everyone who says that really are his disciples, really are his followers. But actually those who do his will, those who show by their life that they are starting to follow Jesus. In another place, he said it was by their fruits, by the fruit of their lives, that you'll recognise whether they really are a follower of Christ. You see, a Christian is not accepted by God on the basis of what they do, but Jesus. But once we are accepted by God, that does change us. And if you see someone who claims to follow Jesus, but there is never any change in their selfishness, in their greed, in their lifestyle, then it would make me question whether they've really understood and experienced that grace and that forgiveness of Jesus at all. And it's quite possible that there are individuals, in fact sometimes whole groups of individuals, that have never really grasped the heart of Christianity. It's one of the sad things often, that there are whole movements that have lost sight of the transforming and forgiving power of Jesus. They've never really experienced it for themselves. So those are three options of what might be going on when you've met a Christian that's messed up. But how does this all reflect on God? We said at the beginning that a child's behaviour would reflect on their parents. And I told you about that family that I met, whose child was so badly behaved. One of the interesting things that happened was just a little while after I met this family, I met someone else that knew this family. And I got chatting to them, and I said to them, I just met this family. I said, I mentioned the son in question. I said, I couldn't believe how badly behaved that child was. And they said, oh, don't you know the story? I said, no, what? They said, oh, they've just adopted him. And suddenly it changed in my mind. You see, up until that point, I thought, those parents maybe aren't very good parents. They haven't looked after that child very well. They're not very responsible. And suddenly I realised, here were these parents who knew all of the problems, all of the baggage, all of the issues that this child came with, all of the behavioural issues. And they said, knowing all of that, you're going to be part of our family. And we're going to love you. And we're going to include you. And we're going to forgive you. And we're going to be there for you. And through that love, you're going to hopefully change. My attitude towards those parents was totally different. And can I say, that is what God does. God says, I know exactly what you're like. I know all your issues. I know all your baggage. I know all your stuff, all the rubbish. And yet, I am willing to adopt you into my family. I'm willing to call you my child, no matter what. And I'm willing to be patient with you. I'm willing to forgive you. I'm willing to work with you. And if you let me, I'm willing to change you to become the person I want you to be. That's the picture of the church. That's the picture of God that we have. And I tell you, that is such a different picture of God, isn't it? Not an irresponsible God, but an incredibly loving, gracious, patient God who sticks with us and invites us to be part of that family, which is great because actually, you know what it means? It means that he invites you to be part of it. He doesn't say, okay, go away, pull your socks up, try hard, and I'll see if you're good enough. He says, no, just as you are, because of what I have done through Jesus, you can be part of this family. You can have this forgiveness. And can I just say, from personal experience, being part of a community of people that have experienced that is a beautiful thing. Being part of a family of people who've experienced that forgiveness and that transformation is so great. One of the reasons why it's so great is this. Everybody is on exactly the same level. I'm part of a church in Bournemouth. There's about 400 people in it. And one of the lovely things about that church is that I'm alongside people who've been Christians for 60 years and some that have been Christians for 6 months. But we're all family. There's no sense of, I've been beating this trail longer than you and I am worthy of more acceptance. No. There's no, I'm going to look down your nose because you're not sorted yet. No. We're family. Young and old, different nationalities, cultures, tastes, styles, all together. It's a beautiful thing. A friend of mine was at university in Bristol, and on one Sunday he was at church and an MP, local MP, came to the church service and he wasn't a Christian but came along, just sat there and witnessed what was going on before and after the service. And he said to him this, the MP said, "We spend millions of pounds trying to establish communities like this, but you're doing it for free." You see, when the church really does understand this forgiveness, this character of God, this transformation, it is a beautiful place to be a part of. Now, I'm not a local to Glasgow, but I can say on good authority that there are communities like that in Glasgow. Maybe not every building contains communities like that, but there are. And if you've not found one yet, keep looking. There are people in this room that would go to some of them, and they're a beautiful place to be a part of. They're not perfect, and that's great, because you can be a part of it too. But they are places of forgiveness and transformation. And they're places that welcome you. Now, you may have a whole load of questions off the back of what I've said. Before we go to questions, let me just say, I want to, maybe in a room like this, there are people at different stages, different levels with this stuff. Some of you might be sitting there and you're saying, "Michael, I think that is a load of rubbish." Maybe the word's not so polite. But you're saying something like that. That's fine. You can tell me why in a moment when we have questions. But if you are thinking that, and if you're thinking this is rubbish, why not check it out for yourself? You can do that in different ways. Why not check out some of the Christians around here? I mean, not just the good-looking ones, but you can check those out, can't you? But check out, the real-life Christians in this university. What has knowing Jesus done for their life? And don't just look at them from a distance. Get to know them. Get to know what that community looks like, and get to know the Jesus that they follow. We've got these little books that are on your chairs, and maybe you've sat on them by now, called Uncover. And we'd love you to take this away. Get your nose into this book and look at some of the evidence for the person of Jesus and say, if I was to genuinely know and follow this person, what would that look like for me? How would that change my life? Okay? That's my challenge to you. Maybe you're here and you're not skeptical, you're not cynical, but maybe you're just intrigued, curious, and you're thinking, I'd love to get to know more. I'd love to know what it is to follow Jesus. What difference would that make? What we're going to run after this week is a course called Uncover. And that's really for people in your situation. People who are wanting to kind of get to grips with this, ask their questions, look into it for themselves. And so if you'd like to come to that, I'll tell you in a moment how you can sign up. But it would be really helpful for you to come to it. You won't have to sing or pray or do anything religious, but you will be encouraged to think, and you will have an opportunity to really chew this stuff over. Okay? So we'd love you to come to that course. Now, what you can do, just before we go to questions, is pick up on your chairs or tables. There should be, haven't got it here now. Oh, a little slip of paper that says Uncover on the bottom corner. We'd love to know your feedback, and I'll mention this now because you can fill this out while we have the Q&A. And just leave us your feedback on the events. How did you hear about the events, and your comments. You can do that anonymously if you want, if you just want to do that. So I'd love you to get your comments, whether you come here normally or not. Just scribble that down now. And then if you would like to know about that course called Uncover, if you'd like to come to that, then tick the box where it says tell me more. And we will tell you more, provided, of course, you leave your name and your mobile number, okay? That's not your national identification number, your health number or whatever. That's your mobile number we'd need. And we'll ring you. We won't give your details to anyone else. We'll just ring you in the next 24 hours and we'll let you know when and where that course is going to be. But we think you'll find it really helpful. We'd love to recommend that to you. So just scribble that down now, and then as you leave after the Q&A, there'll be a box at the door with feedback forms to be put in there, so you can leave your comment cards, put them in as you leave, okay? So you fill it out. There should be pens provided as we do the questions, but we've got 10 minutes for questions. Have we had any texted in? We've had some texted in, so I'll get Abby to come up and read those out, and then if there are any others, we'll do one at a time. Is that okay? Then you can put your hands up.
Okay, so the first one is, why does our culture tend to hold Christians to a higher standard? We seem to have misunderstood what is at the heart of the Christian faith.
Great question. Why do we misunderstand or hold Christians to a higher standard? I think because often we've lost sight of the heart of what the Christian message is all about. I was sharing with some guys this morning that the natural assumption that most of us have when we come to Christianity is a set of moral teachings, and that a Christian is someone who follows a set of moral teachings. And actually, it is far more radical than that. Now, it's not surprising maybe that we think that, because that is how most religions work. But Jesus didn't say a follower of mine is someone who simply keeps my teaching, but it's someone who experiences his forgiveness, who turns from an old way of life, trusts in him, and experiences that forgiveness, and then, with his help, experiences transformation. So, at the heart of Christian message is not do, but actually a message done. Jesus has done what is necessary. We can have his forgiveness. That's why the heart of Christianity and the symbol of Christianity is the cross. It is about what Jesus did for us, not what we primarily do for him. And when you understand that, it changes your attitude to what it is to be a Christian and what the church is all about. Were there any others? Okay, so that's the only ones on the text, but I'm sure there must be others. So any other questions that people want to ask? We've still got 7-8 minutes. Any other questions? Yes?
Can you summarise the 3 different types of people you accept?
Okay, so can I summarise the 3 different types of people? I said if you meet a Christian whose behaviour seems inconsistent with what they claim to follow, what might be going on? And I said 3 things. Firstly, it might be that they're a work in progress, that they have got lots of issues, but they're a young Christian, they've come from a difficult background, they are being changed, but give them time. Secondly, it might be that it's a temporary blip. So they are following Jesus, they have messed up, but they're going to acknowledge that, and they're going to repent, is what the Bible uses. It just means to acknowledge it, to turn from it. Or it might be that they are actually claiming to be something they're not. They claim to be a Christian, but they've never really understood or received the forgiveness and the transforming power of Jesus. And in that sense, I think the charge of hypocrites is right. Not that they're claiming to be perfect, but they're claiming to follow Christ, to know Christ, but actually they don't really know the reality of Jesus, which is what Jesus said often does happen, and even happened in the first century. So it's no surprise that it still happens often today. Yeah. Does that help? Great. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, disagreements, clarifications? Yes?
If someone, like you say, claims that they're a Christian but they don't have the forgiveness of Jesus, what would your response to that be? Like, what would you say to them? Because you obviously don't be like, no, you're not a Christian. You're just like, oh.
Okay.
You don't want to like encourage that hypocrisy. So what would your response or reaction be to that?
Yeah, so how would you help someone who's basically going around saying, yeah, I'm a Christian, but they don't really know Jesus for themselves. They've never experienced that forgiveness. And you're absolutely right. You wouldn't want to just go in and say, no, you're not. No. Because then I'm becoming the judgmental one. I think my answer would be to look again at the person of Jesus. It's surprising how many people I meet that have been to church for years. They've had the kind of what I call, churchianity, but they've not had Christianity. They've had, regulations, rules and rituals, but they've not met the person of Jesus. So I would say, look at Jesus. I was in Malta back in October, and Malta is one of the most religious places you'll go to. It has one of the highest church attendances. But again and again, I was meeting people that had never actually read through themselves as an adult the life of Jesus. They'd never taken a copy of the gospel and looked at Jesus themselves. And so we were saying, we weren't just going around saying, oh, your religion's rubbish. We were saying, no, you claim to follow Jesus? Okay, let's have a look at Jesus. Let's get to know this person you claim to follow and see what he's like. Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you. Any other questions? Great. Okay. Can I say, if you've not got more questions that you want to ask publicly, you might want to chat personally or individually with someone, and that's absolutely fine and understandable. So we're going to have about about 20 minutes or so before the next lunch bar starts. So do feel free to stick around and chat. If you've got to rush off in a couple of minutes, which I'm aware some of you have to get to a lecture, then maybe you could just arrange to meet up for coffee. There's a number of guests around. I'd be happy to talk to you. You can come and grab me as well. But do fill out the feedback forms, because that will be the most helpful way. Leave your details and we'll get in touch with you or ring you in the next 24 hours. That's a sure sign way to make sure that we can help you out. So do fill that out. Just to say as well, at the back, there's a book stall. There's a whole load of books there that might be helpful. There's one that I wrote called What Kind of God that deals with this and a number of issues. That might be helpful for you and others as well. Gavin's on the book stall. He'll help you find one that might be helpful. They're subsidised down to £1 if you're our guest this week. So if you're not a part of the Christian Union, then you're very welcome to have them for £1. If you're a member of the Christian Union, you can have them, you just need to pay a bit more. Please don't leave the Christian Union just to get the cheap books, okay? That would be rather hypocritical. So do have a look at the bookstall. The other thing to say, and we'll tell you about where and when it's going to be, but tonight it's going to be an event, loads of nice stuff happening, and I'm going to be speaking on the issue of success. What is true success, and does it really satisfy? And it'd be great to see you there tonight. But I'm going to hand back to Abby, because she's going to tell you where that'll be and what's going on. Thank you.